Respected sir, I am Lavanya Lal of BCom LLB and I am here to do my presentation, and the topic assigned to me is cumulative and non-cumulative preference share. So let's move on to the topic. Cumulative and non-cumulative preference share. So a company generally authorized to issue two different types of share to the public, equity and preference share. Equity share is most common and easiest way for the company to raise fund for its business, whereas preference share can also come in quite handy. Preference share has two rights, that is preferential right of dividend to be paid as fixed amount or the amount calculated at its fixed rate, which may either be free or subject to income tax. Now the next right is that return of capital on winding up of the company before that of equity share. Now let's move on to what is cumulative preference share. So a cumulative preference share, if there is no profit in a year, the arrears of dividend are to be carried forward and paid out of profit of subsequent year. The preference share is said to be cumulative. The cumulative preference share contain all the features and benefit of ordinary preference share, such as entitlement of higher dividend payout, preference in payment of dividends, and preference in payment over equity share during liquidation of the company. In short, a cumulative preference share are a regular preference share with one additional benefit. The extra advantage is that the holders of these shares have the right to receive dividends even if the issuing company has missed out on paying them in the past. Sometimes the company might not able to generate profits due to number of reasons. This lack of profit may force them to not pay any dividend for certain period of time or pay only a reduced portion of profit as dividend. Even under such situation, the cumulative preference shareholders retain the right to receive dividends unlike equity shareholders. Now let's move on to the example. Suppose a company issues cumulative preference share worth rupees 1000 each, promising to pay rupees 10% annually. In the first year, the economy is in good financial health and pay out the dividend in full, meaning the cumulative preferred shareholder get rupees 100. But in the second year, the economy slow down and the company can only afford to pay half of the dividend, that is rupees 50. And in the third year, the business environment worsens and the company halts dividend payment. The total due of the shareholder is now 150. In fourth year, the economy rebounds and resume dividend payment. The cumulative preferred shareholders must pay rupees 150 in arrears plus the fourth year dividend of rupees 100. The cumulative preferred shareholders must be paid before the company can pay a dividend to other classes of shareholders. Now let's move on to the advantages and disadvantages of cumulative preference share. The investors get to enjoy a high rate of dividend when compared to equity shareholders. The cumulative preference share get a preference over equity share with respect of dividend payouts as well as claims during liquidation. The cumulative preference share don't lose out the dividend if the company fails to pay them. The unpaid dividends keep accumulating till the company finally decides to pay them out. Now moving on to the disadvantage, the dividend rates in such kind of stock remain constant. That is, they get same dividend value regardless of profitability of the company. And the next is that as the issuance of these instruments take place, the dividend rates are placed more than currently accepted interest rate to win the shareholders' preference over the debt financing. Now, in an increasing situation of interest rate, the people lose interest in the stock. On on the contrary, they become a great investment if the rate of interest falls. Now, moving on to the non-cumulative preference share. A non-cumulative preference share are those shares provide the shareholders fixed dividend amount each year from the company's net profit. But in case of company fails to pay the dividend on such preference share to the shareholders in any year, then the dividend cannot be claimed by the shareholder in future. The non-cumulative preference shareholders hold no right to claim any unpaid dividend in subsequent year. They get a fixed amount of dividend out of profit of each year, and in case of company fails to declare the dividend. Now moving on to an example. Assume ABC company with 1000, 5%, 100% per value non-cumulative preference share and outstanding issued a dividend of rupees 500 dividend. Since the preferred shareholders have preferential right to dividend, they would take entire dividend upon the limit, that is 5% of par. and the common stockholders wouldn't receive a dividend that year. If the company declares furthermore dividend this year, again the preferential right of preferred shareholders get retained and they get the first right to dividend as they haven't received their share in full. Any arrears would not get accumulated for the future in case of non-cumulative preference share and thus would not be able to claim it, thereby leading to no obligation on issuing the company. Now let's move on to the advantages and disadvantages of non-cumulative preference share. The investors of non-cumulative preference share get to enjoy a much higher rate of dividend when compared to equity shareholders and other categories of preference share. With respect to the payment of dividend and any other claims during the liquidation process of issuing company, the non-cumulative preference shareholders get preference over equity share. Now the disadvantage is that non-cumulative preference share are one of the costest source of fund, and although the issuing company does not face any legal implication due to non-payment of dividend, they may run the investors' confidence and impact the company's image. Although the risk of non-cumulative preference shareholders are quite similar to equity shareholders, but still the payout is limited, unlike equity shareholders. Now, moving on to the conclusion part. A cumulative preference share are a great way for the company to secure funding for their operation. Not only does issuing the share give companies some flexibility, but it also doesn't dilute the ownership or control. The unpaid dividends on non-cumulative preference share are not carried forward to the subsequent year. If the management does not declare a dividend in a particular year, then there is no question of dividend in arrears in case of non-cumulative preferred share. In non-cumulative preference share, a company can skip the dividend in the year the company has incurred losses. A company issue cumulative preference share so that they can pay out lower dividends as they trade rich in the market. As they are placed above non-cumulative preference share provides flexibility to the company, as in case of financial crisis they can manage without paying out dividend. Thus the company should maintain a balanced capital structure having a proper mix of equity, cumulative and non-cumulative preference share. Thank you. Thank you, sir.